All right. Well, yes, it is 3 o'clock. It is time to begin. So thank you everybody for joining. I'm pleased to be joined by Nicholas here today. We've got a slide he can introduce himself. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jesse Hill. I'm the president of Tier 3 IT Solutions. And the topic of our discussion today is about this intersection between cyber insurance and IT strategy, and ultimately how these things help your business, protect your operations, your reputation, your finances, your employees' well-being, and I'm sure we could find a whole bunch of other things to add on to that list. At the end of the day, what we want you to do is we want you to feel confident and secure, both in the technology side of your operations and in the insurance side of things. So just real quick, we've got a QR code up on here. If you're joining us today and you'd like to learn more about cybersecurity, how it's affecting businesses today, or if you want to get together with me and talk a little bit about AI and the strategies that businesses are using to integrate that into their operations, scan that QR code, fill out your info, and we'll connect one-on-one afterwards. And we are running a promotion right now where we're entering people in a draw for a travel voucher we're going to be doing a little bit later this year. So I mentioned his first name, Nicholas. Do you want to introduce yourself to the participants here today? Tell them a little bit about yourself.
For sure. First off, thanks, Jesse, for having me today. I'm excited to speak about cyber insurance, which is sometimes an under-talked about, I'd say, area of the insurance industry. So I guess a little bit about myself. I work at Westland Insurance. We're a national brokerage that kind of operates all across Canada. I work here out of our Edmonton office, and I specifically operate in commercial insurance. So I help a whole wide range of businesses, from many different businesses, every single type. And I discuss all different types of risks with them, not just cyber exposure, even though that's what I'm here to talk about today. And I guess a little bit just more personally about myself. I'm a big sports guy. I like to be at the golf course all the time. So if anyone ever wants to chat about insurance or anything on the golf course, I'm always open to do that. So that's one of my favorite places to be, kind of outside of the workplace. But yeah, I'd say that's kind of a summary about myself and kind of what I do, I'd say.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining. And I got to give Nicholas props because we met at a golf tournament. And he actually followed up, chased me down, and it turns out we have a lot in common in terms of our clients that we serve, our kind of perspectives on how technology and insurance, are really critical. And so happy to have you here today. I should note as well, just for everybody that's joining, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A, and we will do our best to monitor that and answer any of those that you might have. So obviously you can see up on the screen here, we've got, our agenda put together. Generally, I think you've gathered from the theme of the intro, we're talking about cyber insurance, IT, how they come together, what the risks are, and hopefully a couple of actionable things that you can take away, or at least some information that will guide you into some better conversations with your particular vendors. So to start off with, Nicholas, do you want to maybe explain what is cyber insurance, and just do we have to put a disclaimer that talk to your broker and nothing on here is
I don't know if I need a disclaimer, but yeah, this is definitely something that you should be talking about with your broker, or something that you should definitely bring up, because it's very important. And like all types of insurance, it's trying to offload risk. So it's the same thing with building insurance. Just insurance has developed to suit different kinds of needs over time. And it's like from the first insurance policies that were made to protect against fire losses, things have evolved. And now this has kind of been a very big risk that's been very prevalent in today's marketplace, that, we're seeing that cyber claims are outpacing a lot of liability claims, and it's a big deal. And we're finding that a lot of people, it's a little like under talked about, I'd say, in the industry right now. And so cyber insurance It can be a lot of different things. It can be some things like social engineering, which is sending money to someone that you didn't mean to send money to. It could be ransomware attacks where they get into your system, they get a hold of your data, and they're saying, pay me X amount of dollars, or we will release this info, or you won't be able to get it back. It could be dealing with privacy breaches. If you have client information, if that gets leaked, what do you do then? Again, this is just a kind of brief overview, but it covers a lot of different areas. It covers a lot of different systems, and there are a lot of different practices. And kind of like Jesse said, it goes hand in hand with IT in the sense of protections and cyber insurance and things that you want to make sure you have in place so that claims in the first place don't arise. But I'm sure we'll get a little bit more into that over the course of this presentation, but I think that's a good general overview, I'd say.
Yeah, for sure. And the thing that I find interesting about it, as you were talking about it being, a growing area of claims, is that it's really easy to drive down the street and tell when a building has been lit on fire
Yeah,
and, has collapsed and a business, is no longer operating there. It's a lot harder to tell
yeah.
when somebody has fallen victim to a cyber incident.
And
And
yeah.
and I think what we see inside the industry, and you as well, is that, I mean, I don't know the official number, but I would presume that north of 90 or 95% of cyber incidents never get disclosed or reported on or are visible to the outside
Well,
world.
yeah, and I think the one kind of caveat, I agree with that. And the one thing I think that kind of creates is if you Google cyber attacks, you'll see a bunch, but they'll all be the large corporations. And people will say, oh, well, that doesn't affect me. I'm more of a smaller business. Or why would they come for me, right? I don't have much to give. But the truth is, our manager one of my managers, he's very into cyber, and he likes to say it's like trying car doors. It's like car thieves. They try every single door just trying to get in, right? And that's kind of the truth of it is you can look up right now and see many, many cyber attacks reported, but it's those really, really large ones. And I think that's a good point to add to that, I'd say.
Yeah, and I pulled up this next slide here. So for those of you that have joined, if you're not familiar with Coalition, they are and what they call an active insurance provider. They really target businesses with their cyber coverages. And one of the things that I appreciate about them is that they actually put out claims reports. And the most recent one that I saw for 2025, they actually listed one of the areas of claims that was increasing the most were what were called vendor email compromises. And the thing about a cyber incident, cyber insurance is designed to protect you from a cyber incident, is that a cyber incident could be a full-scale ransomware attack like the co-op chain experienced earlier this year. It could be a a person on your team who falls victim to a phishing email and their account gets compromised, or it could be you falling victim to one of your customers or vendors or partners compromised. And so a vendor email compromises, let's say, for example, one of my suppliers has a person who has gotten their email compromised, and now a criminal is basically managing their email and they're sending from that account as if they're the real person. And you realize that this is completely outside of my area of control, except for training my staff and making them aware and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, like Nicholas was saying, it's very rare that small and medium businesses publicize, and probably for good reason, that they've been a victim. But I'm sure he could tell stories of all kinds of
Yeah.
incidents that have come up that had big impact that nobody outside the organization was aware of.
Yeah. Yeah, completely. And that's the thing. Like scale can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Like $2,000 can be a big hit to some small contractor who operates by himself. And the magnitude is dependent on your business, right? And that's not going to get reported anywhere, but it could put someone out of business. So that's the
Yeah,
one thing I'd say.
yeah, yeah. And actually, I had two separate conversations today with different businesses who are looking to improve their cybersecurity. And, they both were wanting to do that because their cyber insurance requirements are, saying they need to, and their client requirements are saying that they need to, because their clients are realizing, that they're a risk factor to them as well. So we're not going to spend a ton of time, digging into, the individual kind of risk factors and those types of things. But suffice it to say that when it comes to placing insurance, and this is the same for every kind of insurance, whether it's vehicle or, E&O or cyber, um, your strategy in how you are addressing and minimizing the risk is going to affect the options that are available to you. So, Nicholas, I'm curious, in your experience when you're talking to businesses, um, like what are they thinking about when it comes to placing a cyber insurance policy? Like, why are they coming to you, and what obstacles are they finding?
Well, I think it's kind of like we said, like in the news, they see a lot of different things about these large cyber attacks, and I think it is some of them are definitely kind of noticing and being like, okay, this is a big risk, and they're kind of saying, okay, maybe we need to try and offset this. And I think there is a lot of word getting around now about how important cybersecurity is as a whole, not just insurance. And maybe it's from their IT provider, maybe it's from their friends. And I think that's the one thing they're kind of looking at is, okay, like we're seeing examples where this is affecting businesses at a large margin. And whether this is, like you said, offsetting maybe a large ransom payment, or maybe just, again, if your system shut down for over a week, there's business interruption coverage into cyber policy again. And it's the same thing again as if your building goes on fire and you can't use it because of fire, your business interruption kicks in. But of course, cyber business interruption is on its own. So these exposures need their own policy. And that's the one thing is now cyber's developed that you need a specialized policy for it. If this is being thrown on to your policy that you have right now, it's probably not sufficient coverage.
Mhm.
And that's the one thing is there's so many specialized markets that are focusing on just solely cyber insurance, and they can get a policy that is specific to your risk that you are offsetting through cyber. And that's the one thing I think is those standalone policies are becoming very readily available and more important. And like you said, a lot of businesses are requiring them nowadays, and to be viewed as a legitimate business, like we do certificates of insurance for every type of business, it's becoming more and more prominent, I'd say, in terms of just being seen as a legit business and having proper coverages to protect your business so that if you do anything happens, you're prepared, I'd say.
Yeah, we're going to get onto a list of kind of things that you should be doing. But from our perspective, and part of the reason we reach out and work with cyber insurance brokers is that we often find that there's a business that operates in a certain area of specialty, and they know that they need insurance. And then there's a cyber insurance broker that's going to talk to them about policy and premiums and those types of things, but they're both dependent upon the actual implementation of the technology infrastructure, security best practices, and all of those types of things. And I don't know if you've run into it or not, but I'd be curious to find out. Have you run into any instances where a business maybe has had a claim denied because it was just discovered that they didn't actually meet the minimums?
Well, the one thing I would say is like we're pretty solid with our policies and our guidelines for cyber insurance at Westland. We're lucky that Cameron Baker, he's our director, he's one of the national cyber leaders, and he's in our office. So he's very careful with these types of things, and he's trained us in a really strong way that a lot of these specialty markets that we deal with have over 90% claims acceptance rate, which is pretty
Mhm.
high. And we have even some that are closer to 99%. And the one thing I'd say is a lot of brokers maybe who aren't as trained and maybe who aren't as familiar with cyber insurance maybe may place subpar coverage or coverage with these types of companies that have those waivers and those conditions in their policies, because a lot of the companies that we work with actually don't have that, like let's say like what we're talking about, like MFA, like those types of things waivers in the policies. A lot of our policies that we work with actually don't have those types of waivers.
Interesting.
And sometimes that is a more specific to a company, and that's why you always have to read the policies. So it really depends because it's very different amongst each company, and that's why we like there's certain providers that we like to deal with individually that are preferred providers for our cyber insurance for that kind of reason. And the one thing I will see sometimes where I could see where that might come into play is a lot of times some companies like Wallenese or some of these other companies will throw on a cyber on the commercial package policy as an addition for like, let's say a couple $100 or something, they'll throw on what they call cyber coverage. And again, like that's not sufficient. You need a standalone policy. That stuff, that is where a lot of small businesses will run into problems because they see it in their package and they think, oh, we have cyber coverage. Well, maybe a little bit will cover some IR costs, but ultimately, if you have a breach, you need a standalone policy that's going to respond and is more comprehensive in its wordings and its limits as well. So that's the one thing that I would warn, especially small businesses against, is that commercial package. If it's thrown on there, what really is that covering, and what are your limits too? That's the other portion. It's the limit. What limit do you need? And that's one thing we can definitely help with and find benchmarking tactics. And I don't know if you come across that ever too, Jesse. It's like clients just thinking what's kind of the limit and what could I potentially be breached for, or ransom, or that kind of thing.
It adds up real quick. It's interesting to hear you say that there are insurance providers that aren't necessarily listing the security controls, because when we look at this list, and it's part of what we've found challenging in cyber insurance applications, is the applications have really poorly written questions sometimes. Yeah. So it might say something like, do you enable multi-factor authentication on all cloud services? Or it'll say, do you always enable MFA on all cloud services? And every time I'm talking to somebody about how to answer that, there's a box for a yes and a box for a no. But it says always and all. Yeah. So that's like saying, do you always close and lock your front door every time you leave? It's like, well, I mean, yeah, most of the time, but sometimes my arms are full. It's like every cloud service. Well, not every cloud service has multi-factor authentication. Mm-hmm. So again, when you're going through, we find that it's really helpful to have your broker in the room, yeah, to have your IT provider in the room, virtually is fine, yeah, and really talking about it. Because the other side of the perspective, for us is sometimes if people just want to check the boxes in the insurance application, they're not realizing that the purpose of a security control isn't just to say, yes, I'm doing it, but it's there's usually 2 or 3 other things that you should be doing, in mm-hmm. addition. Yep. So for multi-factor authentication, mm-hmm. well, maybe you should be using single sign-ons. Maybe mm-hmm. you should be ensuring that it's a certain type of multi-factor, those types of things. So it gets a little bit more nuanced, I think.
And the one thing I wanted to add on to that is, like, you're correct. MFA is a minimum nowadays. Like, if you don't have, everybody should have MFA, 100%. But the one thing I wanted to add is that sometimes different protections apply, would you say, to different types of businesses better than others, right? And that's one thing that I kind of see why sometimes there isn't general requirements required for every single policy. Because would you say, like, obviously there's the baseline layer, but are there certain things that you see that work better in different sectors, would you say? Like, because cyber insurance is kind of written from a portfolio underwriting kind of space, where in their categories of businesses, but I don't know if you had anything to add to that.
Well, I mean, for sure. So whenever we're talking to a business that's in financial services or health services, you talked about the personal information and data breaches. It actually drives me bananas. I put a post on LinkedIn a couple of weeks back. I've talked to probably 4 different medical clinics in the last month that were having issues with technology and were looking for some help. And not a single one of them was aware of their requirements under the Health Information Act for basic things. Um, and so it's really hard sometimes because, there's an act that says they have to do certain things, but oftentimes it's the insurance or a client requirement that is going to push a business into actually getting insurance coverage. And so, yeah, we see the professional services firms, financial services, health services, they have higher requirements than maybe an oil field services
Yeah.
or transportation or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But to the point of the checklist here, it's not comprehensive. There's many other things you could and probably should be doing. But just like if you're insuring a vehicle, there are certain things that they're going to require from you.
Yeah.
We touched on this a little bit already, and I was a little surprised to hear from you that a lot, 90+% of claims get approved. What we hear is that the reasons that a claim typically will, run into roadblocks is one of these three things, where, the lack of security controls is really saying, you checked yes on one of those boxes,
Mm-hmm.
and then you didn't do it.
Yeah.
Right.
No.
Which is kind of like saying, oh yeah, everybody who drives our vehicles has a valid license, but they don't.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes sense. And the one thing I would add on to that, just to make sure, is I wouldn't say 90% of claims in the entire industry, or I'm not saying that, but I'd say in our office, like, and in companies we work with, that's what we see. And I don't know if that's more of just a training aspect, but for sure, I definitely can see how in the industry that it 100% is that, you, like you said, there are a lot of situations where claims do get denied. I would say across the industry for sure.
Yeah. One thing that I'm curious about to hear from you as well is you mentioned earlier about, if there was a large, like a ransomware or something like that, and paying the ransoms. Do you have you guys run into experiences around that? And do you want to talk a little bit about maybe some of the intricacies of kind of handling a situation like that?
Yeah, so a lot of the times we work a lot of time with the company, they'll have their IR team who will kind of they're usually fairly familiar with some of these groups who do these ransomware attacks, and they kind of know a little bit about a background behind them. And a lot of the time it's actually up to the client whether they want the insurance company to pay out that ransom or they want to rebuild their data, right? And sometimes it may be not possible to rebuild the data or to pay the ransom in either regard. Maybe it's a criminal organization and you can't pay that ransom because maybe they're listed as a terrorist organization, so you can't pay that out. But again, it's usually up to the client. And the one thing a lot of the time is a lot of people come to me and they go, okay, well, we back up our data all the time. Well, that's great. But the problem is these criminals didn't just say, oh no, you're backed up. Oh, we can't do anything, right? So they make copies of this data, and then all of a sudden you get into privacy stuff with the privacy commissioner, right? And you get into a whole new ball game. So these ransomware, it's very tricky to handle. And this is exactly why you need this offloaded to insurance, right? Because the insurance company will work with the IR team, will work with the client as well to handle these types of things. And this ties back into kind of what you said about the protections. And maybe sometimes, like I said, maybe sometimes there always isn't waivers in some of the policies we deal with. But if you have those policies in place, there's an opportunity cost of dealing with these claims when you could be shut down for weeks and not running your business, and you're devoting all your time to trying to settle this claim with the insurance company and with the threat actors. And there's a large opportunity cost to that as well. And that's another reason why you want to offload that risk. You don't want to be dealing with that. It takes a lot of time, resources, and then who knows what happens in the future, right? Upcoming renewals, that type of thing. But
Yeah.
that's kind of the kind of breakdown of how it's so interconnected between so many different things in the claims process and in cyber insurance in general. And that's kind of what I would say for that regard.
Yeah. So, and I wanted to bring that up because he made a couple of points there. First of all, if you ever find yourself in a situation where you've been victimized by a ransomware group and they're asking for a ransom, make sure you're speaking with your insurance, your lawyers, your advisors, because as Nicholas mentioned, some of these organizations are considered terrorist organizations. And if you pay a ransom, you actually may be committing a crime. And so the insurance, the incident response teams, the IR teams, they investigate, they basically decide whether you're even able to pay that ransom. And then the second part, and this is the kind of bigger issue, is if they've exfiltrated or copied your data, how are you getting control of that back again? So you've got to work with them really closely, and it's that challenging balance, I think, for people of saying, okay, well, when do I talk to my insurance company? How do I know if it's a big enough problem? Because kind of like a fender bender in your car, there's probably times where you think, oh, you know what, I'll just fix it myself. And then you get it to the shop and find out, oh, this is a much bigger issue under the hood here than I thought.
Oh, but definitely. And I think the one part about that to follow up on is kind of is kind of finding that kind of root cause, as well as the insurance company will run reports to try and find where that breach came from and what it was as a result of, so that in the future it can be prevented as well, and they can maybe tighten up some security in that area. But that's one other part, is that root cause analysis, and that forensics really is a big part of the claim as well. And that does end up costing a lot as well, but that is a key portion to find out, to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And that's one of the aspect I would highlight in that regard.
Yeah. So I found it really interesting recently. I was chatting with I forget who it was, another business owner, and they were talking about how um, their IT provider was actually recommending to the customer that they did not get cyber insurance. They actually saw it as a threat to a risk, or like a conflict of interest almost. And I'm like, man, that to me is wild. So this particular slide is really, for me to say that I think that if you are serious about protecting your business, your operations, your, financial well-being, you've got to work together with your technology strategy, your insurance, legal, HR, operations. Like, it is a comprehensive approach. And for anybody who has attended one of our incident response simulations, the thing that I always try to express is that a cyber incident is not an IT problem, right? Your IT team, your IT department, your IT provider is a part of the solution. But when you're in a full-blown cyber incident, you've got public relations issues, you've got legal issues, you've got HR. Like, it's stressful when your business is not operating and your staff have to deal with that. You've got financial issues and operations and all of those types of things. So what I would encourage you is to really take a step back and think about it not so much as, again, an IT problem, but a business problem. And much like, your insurance, I think most businesses, they start with a, kind of a smaller policy, and as they grow and they mature over time, they realize, oh, we have other risk from other, areas. We have more, that's at risk now than we did before. And it's the same with cybersecurity. It's that there is no such thing as a cybersecure business. You cannot go from 0 to 100 overnight. And so this process of saying, okay, we're gonna run some assessments, we're gonna put in the controls, the security measures that are going to help us the most. We're going to document them, we're going to test them, and then we're going to come back again and we're going to start over again. And I think that's part of one of the things that cyber insurance does really well is regular reviews. Right.
Yep. Yeah, I would say so too. And a lot of the providers we work with, they have a lot of proactive kind of measures too, and they're also scanning, and they have a lot of threat monitoring processes that they kind of monitor with their clients and a lot of their book. And I think I agree with that they are very strong in that regard, and they have a lot of services too that kind of help the clients in that sense. But I agree. I kind of like what you said there, where it's like they have to work together. That's the ultimate thing is cyber insurance, IT have to work together because you can have the best IT controls in the world. And you never know when that day could happen where you get someone clicks a phishing email or someone sends money somewhere that they weren't supposed to when someone got access to their emails. You never know. And that's the thing. No matter how good of IT, it can always happen, and you need to always have a way to offload that exposure. And we see it all the time. Like we were talking about earlier, the biggest companies in the world who have the best IT systems around, they get breached too. And it could be, like we said, simple phishing emails, 70 to 80% of these attacks.
Yeah. 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 Again, more often than not, these cyber incidents are not technology misconfiguration. Like they're not, really sophisticated hackers sitting there, finding holes in their firewalls. It's a human error. Someone inside your organization is a greater risk than anybody that's outside of it. We say it all the time, like the cyber criminals, they only have to be right once.
Yeah.
We as business owners, cybersecurity professionals, insurance providers, we have to be right all day, every single day to protect our operations from loss and impact. So we are at a half an hour here. We've got some time available for any questions or comments that anybody might have. Again, we've got just the QR there if you want to connect afterwards. Nicholas, maybe I'll just turn the floor over to you while we check the chat and the Q&A here, find out if there was anything else you wanted to expand on, share some advice or anything on your side.
Yeah, the one thing I would say that like I stressed earlier is a lot of people maybe sometimes struggle, I'd say determining their limit of cyber insurance can always be a big issue, I'd say, and maybe contrasting different policies. But I'd say like that one recent case that was really big in the news was that Hamilton one that I assume a lot of people heard about and you wanted to probably discuss. And like that's probably where a lot of people see the claims denial thing. And all of the time, it's just that's a perfect example of where you need to take cyber insurance seriously. Because I was reading a couple articles on that the other day, and they actually said that the council was aware of their MFA warranty in their policy, but they didn't want to do it because a lot of them thought it was more work. And that's it's a lot of times it's that kind of ignorance or just lack of just, this is how it was for this many years, so we don't want to change this or do this extra step. But it's such a big thing nowadays, and that's the one thing is read your policy, know what's covered, know what warranties you have, like any insurance policy, know what restrictions, limitations. If you need help determining a limit, talk to your broker who can help benchmark it. There's a lot of different softwares out there nowadays that can benchmark it against loss data in the industry or across peer groups to kind of determine that. And like I said, just have these conversations with your broker and your IT department as well, or your IT provider, just like Jesse said, because again, it's a process. It's not just one or the other. You can't say, oh, I don't need IT because I have insurance. Well, insurance isn't a maintenance contract, right? It's to offset those larger losses. And that's why you need both working together. And like I spoke about, you don't want to claim. You don't want that to happen, because if you get one, you're going to be in a long stretch to resolve that claim. It's not easy, right? So it's always that mixture of both that you need together. And it's always good to have those discussions where they're in kind of in the same call and you just kind of talk about it. And maybe the IT provider learns something, the insurance provider learns something about cybersecurity. It's kind of a benefit for everyone, I'd say. And it's kind of forming that team environment and kind of super team to kind of solve all those issues, I'd say.
Yeah. So of everything that you said there, it's all great. The one thing I want to stress on, read your policy.
Yeah.
No, I would be willing to bet that most people have not or don't read their policy. But there's interesting things in there. One of the things that I recall when I switched our cyber insurance a couple of years back was I got to one of the early pages and they had a list in there of I forget what they called them, basically approved vendors.
Yeah.
And they had incident response firms, forensic investigation firms, breach counsel, all of these types of things. And truthfully, and this was about 5-6 years ago, that I was like, you know what? I don't actually know how each of these fit into what we might need. But my insurance provider has listed these as approved vendors. And so I started meeting with each of them, right? And certain things like a breach counsel, as an example, I mean, it's basically a lawyer who specializes in managing and responding to cyber incidents. So you could imagine if you're in a situation where there's been a cyber incident, a breach, a ransom, and we're having some of these questions about, well, what can we tell our customers? Your legal team is going to be the one that will say, whoa, 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 do not call it a breach.
Yeah.
First things first, you need to know that the word breach has legal implications, and you, me, Nicholas,
Yeah.
none of us are qualified to call it a breach. That has to come from your legal team. Because if you put out an email to all of your customers that says, hey, we suffered a cyber breach, oh my gosh, you
Yeah.
just opened a whole can of worms that
Hmm.
you may not even be aware of.
Yeah.
And those in your insurance policy, it'll have information about, should you be on retainer with certain types of firms, certain, things ahead of time. And so knowing what your options are before you ever need to use them is really valuable.
Yep, for sure. No, I can definitely agree with that. And that's goes for every insurance policy, right? You definitely got to read the, because there's always warranties and restrictions. So no, that's well said, I'd say. And like you said, that breach counsel is a large part of that. If you have any client data that's sensitive data or client information, that's sensitive data. And if that gets leaks, you're dealing with all sorts of government issues. And like you said, that's one thing that the breach coach that kind of deals with. They deal with those letters out to people and they handle that type of thing and help you deal with that. And that's something you don't want to deal with yourself or have to want to pay for out of pocket. That's for sure.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I appreciate everybody hopping on. I'm not seeing anything pop up in the chat or the Q&A right now. So, I guess I would just say thank you, Nicholas, for hopping on, spending your time, sharing your knowledge. I really appreciate it. If anybody has any questions, know where to get a hold of us. And
Mhm.
we look forward to chatting with you all soon. So thanks a lot, everyone, and have a great day.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Jesse.
All right.